Evening, my name's Jo from Starjumpz, and I'm here with Helen Cruthers, who is a child and adolescent psychotherapist who's going to talk to us about parenting children and young people with neurodiversity. Helen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, happy to. Hi, I'm Helen Cruthers. So I'm an integrative arts psychotherapist originally, and I've been working with families for 30 years therapeutically. And my particular areas of interest are neurodiversity and developmental trauma, and the sometimes challenging task of parenting. So Jo's asked me today to share a little bit about parenting children with neurodiversity, and I'll share slides for 20 minutes or so, and feel free to put questions in the chat. Is that right, Jo? I'm assuming that's a yes. In sign language, yes. Okay, cool. Right, so here are the slides. Let me get it on the slideshow. Okay, so when we're thinking about parental responding, obviously this needs to be underpinned by an overview of neurodiversity, which we may or may not get onto today, and you may already have your own understanding. And it's such a developing field that everything we knew or the terms we used or our understandings 5-10 years ago are different now and might well be different again in another 5 or 10 years. So getting a broad overview and also getting an understanding of what the latest research says or current ways of thinking can be really helpful. And when we're thinking about the neurodiversity umbrella, it can be thought of as a condition, a struggle, a disability, a disorder, or a difference. And some of this is socio-political, and whether we see that people with, for example, autism or ADHD have struggles to overcome, or whether we see society as being too neurotypical and not being flexible to their needs. There can be many debates around that. So the neurodiversity umbrella is very wide, and the thinking around it is very wide. The conditions or struggles, they can be hidden or seen. So we know a lot about masking. So for some young people, we will know about their struggles from their behaviour. But for other young people, most of the struggle will be internal. It can be behavioural, as it often is. That's often what alerts us as adults, teachers, parents, therapists, our attention to a young person, that they are behaving in a way that's causing them difficulties or other people difficulties. But as I say, it can also be internal, or it can be more relational, less behavioural difficulties and more about their relationship with the world and other people. What we do know, that these are lifelong conditions in our current understanding, but the impacts can be ameliorated and people's strengths can definitely be built on. So we know that how adults respond to young people, to all young people, but especially young people with autism or ADHD, it makes a huge world of difference for them to be met, understood, and have sensitive, attuned parenting can make all the difference to them feeling alone and misunderstood in a world that doesn't really get them, or feeling supported to make the most of who they are and building on their strengths. Okay, so some of my first thinking about this talk was looking at acronyms that I've made up, and I'm not sure Warsaw's is particularly catchy, might not catch on, but this was some of the thinking that I had around helpful parenting. So the first thing we need to be attuned to is working with the young person to work out what they need, particularly when close to overwhelm or having a meltdown. These are indications that things are just too much. They're not coping by themselves. There's too much stimulus, not enough stimulus. Just their relationship to the world at that point is askew, and working with them to try and work out what is it that they need, what are they not getting enough of or too much of. So as much as possible, working as a team with your young person. And supporting with anxiety, we'll have a look at a bit closer at anxiety in a moment, but anxiety is so crucial in neurodiversity. So many things we can track back to anxiety, but things that look like behaviours or difficult ways of relating are often increased when the young person or the child is anxious or fearful or overwhelmed. So once we can start thinking about, okay, things are going wrong, is this young person anxious? We can help with tools to manage anxiety. We can think about prevention. Okay, this thing is making them anxious, so how can we change that next time? For example, if we notice that a change in routine makes someone very anxious, how can we do our best to make sure that unexpected changes don't happen? And then to support with anxiety, because it feels horrible when you're anxious, and to be alongside that young person to help them regulate. So regulation is also key, and just telling people to calm down really helps. So often what is needed is support to co-regulate, like we do with much younger children. So if you think of babies or toddlers, we don't expect them to just be able to calm down. We actively, as adults and parents, help them calm down with our voice, with our words. With babies, it might be rocking, soothing, letting them know it's going to be okay. It's much more helpful if we can be part of their regulation rather than expect them to do it by themselves, or if we get dysregulated as well. So a lot easier said than done. But remembering that at that point, their ability to regulate themselves is not available. Otherwise, they wouldn't be having an overload or a meltdown. So how can we get alongside them and help them to regulate? Then with autism particularly, thinking about the young person's social battery. So in talking to young people with autism, it's a really helpful idea. For some people, they're not particularly interested in social interaction. Other young people are, but it takes a huge amount out of them. It's just exhausting because some of it doesn't come naturally because they're working hard to pick up social cues and social skills. Then knowing that the social battery might be run out. So being really aware of how much of other people can somebody take and when do they need to withdraw and have their own time. And then thinking more about ADHD, thinking about a socialized battery. So how much have I had to behave? How much have I had to sit still? How much have I had to keep some of my impulses under control? And recognizing that that might be a short life, and rather than pushing it further or let's do another hour, that I've done really well to kind of keep myself under control and pleasant, and now I need to go and let off some steam. When we as parents and adults try to adapt ourselves to the young people's needs rather than expecting them to fit in with how they should be or how their peers are at that age, what helps is that we're building a secure base, that they know that when they get dysregulated, we're going to be there to support them. And for me, that isn't opposite to encouraging them and helping them develop their potential, but none of us are at our best and develop our potential when we're scared and when we're anxious and when we're confused and overwhelmed. So one of our priority tasks is trying to help them feel secure with us, safe in themselves, and that is the place from which they can push themselves, from which they might extend their social battery, from which they might try and do a little bit more. So it comes from feeling safe, not from feeling challenged out of their comfort zone. And this relates to the concept of window of tolerance, which you might be familiar with. So we all have so I've got a screen here, a window of tolerance. When I'm inside that window, I feel fairly safe, I feel calm, I can think, I can reflect, I can wonder about other people and their feelings and my impact on them. But when I'm pushed outside of my window, whether that's being triggered or through changes or sensory overwhelm, then I'm more likely to become dysregulated. I might go into fight or flight or freeze, and I'm going to be less able to use the thinking part of my brain. So I flip my lid, my prefrontal cortex. So even if I can normally think about cause and effect, if I do this, then that will happen. I'm trying to save up my money for that special thing I want to buy. In this state, my thinking brain is not very accessible to me. So really noticing and getting to know our children and seeing when they're inside that window and when, because they're tired or hungry or there's been a lot of demands on them that day, their window is really, really shrunk, and it won't take much to push them outside of it. So in that way, we can work with them and see when they've got a bit of flex, when we can maybe ask them to do that extra thing or challenge them a little bit. But when they're right on the edge, they're going to be flipped outside easily. And part of our job is co-regulating them, helping them to get back into their window of tolerance where they're at their best. And then the last one on this list is sensory issues, which play such a huge part in young people's experience when they have neurodiversity. So often there's an absolute overload, and some of the behaviours and challenges we see are in response to how any of us would respond to an overwhelming smell or a really loud noise or being touched in a way that's uncomfortable to us. So again, we can spot when there is an overload, we can think about prevention and also protection. So something as simple as ear defenders when you're going to be somewhere loud. And again, there's this secure base and window of tolerance. So in my experience, when young people are allowed to wear ear defenders, for example, what tends to happen is that I feel calmer now. I know that I can protect myself from this noise. And from that place, sometimes they can experiment with taking them off and expanding their tolerance. But when it's just assaulting them and they feel they have no way of protecting themselves, then the instinct is to withdraw more. And the more we know about our young people's sensory issues, the more we can just really respect and try and put ourselves in their shoes. So that smell isn't overwhelming for me, but if I imagine a really difficult smell that's pervading everywhere, it would be very unsettling for me. So very much trying to put ourselves in their shoes. Okay, I'm just going to check. That's from Liz. Cool. Right. So I mentioned anxiety, and I think it's absolutely crucial. So some individuals with ADHD suffer from strong anxiety. However, sometimes there can be a broad thinking that individuals with autism often suffer from anxiety overload. So hyper anxious, things are much more likely to provoke anxiety, than for other people, and that sometimes those with ADHD can be at the other end of the anxiety spectrum without the healthy anxiety that can contribute to caution, cause and effect thinking, and impulse control. So it's really worth thinking about your child or your young person and their anxiety. They have too much, too little? Do you need to teach them about caution and cause and effect thinking and help them control their impulses? Or is it about creating that secure base and encouraging that window of tolerance that we've talked about, so that they can feel safe enough, and from there they can expand and explore? So thinking about fight, flight and freeze, when the environment is either understimulating or overloading for us, we're quite likely to get into the lower parts of our brain, stop thinking so well, and be more dysregulated. Well, another way of thinking about parenting that helps is range. So regulation, we've talked about, co-regulating with your child. That might be carrying on when other children their age might be perfectly able to regulate themselves, and you might need to give more support, like with a young child. So co-regulating and thinking about that window of tolerance. Again, supporting with anxiety, and that's even when it's expressed in angry and resistant ways. It took me quite a long time to get my head around that the top emotion or the top behaviour wasn't the only thing that was going on. So not always, but often underneath oppositional behaviour or angry, resistant behaviour or fighting behaviour, that underneath somebody can be quite scared and anxious. And insight is really helpful. So whether we get that from our children, if they happen to be verbal and able to articulate their experience, what's going on for them, but also when we start to understand concepts such as window of tolerance or flipping our lid, to share that with other people who look after the child, with the children and young people themselves, to start to understand themselves and their bodies and their brains. It gives us all a language to help communicate, including about our own parenting. So we might well say, oh, I'm really sorry that I shouted just then. I flipped my lid. I'm really stressed today. So we can lead by example in terms of emotional literacy and giving the message that, you know, we're all going to get stressed and find life difficult sometimes, and we can all learn to manage and regulate ourselves. So N is for needs led. So generally, this is true of all children, but especially children with neurodiversity. If we're pushing against them and we're just trying to get behavioural change, we often don't get very far. So if we think underneath whatever's challenging, the behaviour or the way that they're relating to us, what is going on? What does this child or young person need? What is the need that isn't being met? Is it to move? Is it for stimulation? So, for example, if a child has strong ADHD, I remember talking to one boy once, and we were having a school meeting, and the school were quite annoyed with him because he never stayed still. And he was explaining, I can keep my feet still if you want, but my hands will move all over the place. Or I can keep my hands still, but then my feet will be tapping the floor. He couldn't see any way that he could keep his whole body still. So then, rather than have an unrealistic expectation of him, his need was to be able to keep moving. So much healthier for him to have something he could fiddle with, or one of the bands around the legs of his chair. So rather than push against his need to move, acknowledge and accept that's what he needs to do, and find acceptable ways for him to do it. For connection, that's an interesting one. So sometimes children and young people, especially if they're struggling with their social skills, may be trying to find a way to connect, but it can come across in quite a clumsy way, or a way that isn't socially acceptable to other people. For fun, some children, especially with ADHD, have a low natural production of dopamine and a higher seeking of it. So, and if I'm doing something in quotes naughty that I'm not allowed to do, then that's fine to stop me doing that. But maybe I need to do something else that will produce some pleasure or fun. I might need a challenge. I might be bored. I might need to have just been really well behaved all of school, and I just need to get out and let rip. I might need your help in regulating. I just can't do it today. My window of tolerance is small. My resources are low. I just need some help here. And things that are regulating are often repetitive, rhythmic movements, or at school it can be things like brain breaks. So just expectations of me might just be too high. I've been sitting concentrating for 20 minutes and that is my max. You can either acknowledge that need, let me fiddle with something, give me a brain break, give me a movement break, or you can accept that my behavior is going to escalate. So obviously it's a lot better for me and for everyone else in the class if you can anticipate that need and support me to find healthy ways to meet that need that don't cause any problems to myself or anybody else. And then again, we come back to sensory awareness. So meeting the needs, if that is for tactile, touch, fiddling, for helping with sensitivities, noticing when things are too loud, too bright, and that way we can prevent or think about environmental protection. And when we're thinking about sensory issues, then traditionally we might think about the 5 senses, and all of these can be over or under sensitive. So if you think about them like a volume dial, so for some children, they can be really, really sensitive to touch, and just a light touch feels like somebody hit them. And often they might say, "Ow, she hit me." And we as adults tend to go, "No, she didn't. Just, yeah, stop making it up." Again, if we can try and explore and understand what that actually feels like to that young person, and then we can help them understand, maybe tolerate or protect themselves from things that hurt. And likewise, it can be really under sensitive. So it may be that children need a really, really tight hug and a squeeze in order to feel a hug, in order to feel connected. And there's 2 layers of the skin. One responds particularly to light touch and one responds to deep pressure, which is why some people with neurodiversity benefit from weighted blankets and things like that. I'm not going to do these in order, actually. I'm going to do the ones we're most familiar with. So touch, looking. So again, light can be too bright. Hearing, noise can be far too loud, or they can be undersensitive, so finding it hard to hear things or needing things very, very loud to have an impact. Sense of smell, sense of taste can be under or over. And then the other elements, which the OTs amongst you are working with constantly. So interoception is a really interesting sense. It's our kind of how are you sense, and it's almost like the tactile system on the inside of the body that tells us if we're too hot, too cold, need a wee, need a poo, hungry, thirsty. And some of our young people, that's turned up so high. So some of the anxiety can come from, like right now, if I really tune in, I can just about feel my heartbeat. But for some people, it's turned up so loud and strong that they're constantly aware of their heart beating, which can actually lead you to feel quite panicky. Or children who always like, oh, my stomach hurts, or a strong sense of some internal pain. Alternatively, the interoception can be really turned down low. So we can have kids who don't really know when they're hungry, when they're thirsty, if they need a wee, if they need a poo. Then the vestibular system is our gravitational security. We'll find with a lot of young people with neurodiversity, they just feel less solid on their feet, less sure that the ground underneath them is going to support them. I had a friend who's talking about walking downstairs and never quite being sure that the floor was going to come up to meet them. Every step down just felt a little bit risky. So you can imagine if you're not feeling safe in that way, that's going to lead to a lot of anxiety. And then finally, proprioception, which is our body in space, or our body map, and not having a clear sense of where I stop, where you begin, how much pressure to use. That can cause, difficulties in playground games, such as playing tag and you push somebody far too hard, or holding your pencil. So knowing exactly the right pressure to use for the right things. So all of these, the way that our body moves, can lead to feeling insecure, unsettled, overwhelmed, and unsafe. And so it's always a really helpful area to think about when parenting. And then from the developmental trauma field, there's a concept called PACE, which is a lovely way to parent any children. And it was developed from observing healthy parents with healthy young babies, and seeing, what are the qualities in naturally healthy parenting? And there's playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, so people are really interested. What's going on? Is your tummy sore? Do you need your nappy changed? And empathy. That's a really, really helpful anchor for any of us parenting, to forge a solid connection with our young people. And that leads to secure-based parenting, as I said before, where there's a feeling of emotional safety. If I can sensitively attune to needs, if I can meet needs, help soothe, help regulate, then the young person feels safe enough in their window of tolerance. And from there, they can push themselves. They can take that challenge. Expanding that window of tolerance, or another way of putting that, is the zone of proximal development. So we don't tend to learn either staying totally in our comfort zone or reaching far too far ahead. So we need to help our children negotiate challenges that are just next door in that zone of proximal development. So there's some challenge, but it's not too far. And another really helpful thing to do when our standard expectations for our children don't seem to be working, such as we all have dinner at the table together, or a certain amount of screen time, and our neurodiverse child isn't managing that well, is to work out our parameters. What are our bottom lines? Is it essential that they eat at the family table every night if it causes huge amounts of stress? Or is the most important thing that we spend some quality family time together? And is there another way to do that? Is it really important that they eat the same food as everybody else, even though they hate the textures? Or is the important thing that they get the nutrition? So what are we trying to achieve? Is what we're already doing achieving that, or actually pushing it further away? And so within our parameter, right, you need to eat, 5 green things every week. Can we give some choice about how they achieve that goal, and some family agreements about everybody needs to do X, Y, and Z, but they might do X, Y, and Z in slightly different ways. So how can we adapt to our children and young people? And I think this is the last thing. The last concept I wanted to introduce is from NVR, Nonviolent Resistance Parenting. And it's easy to talk about parenting in a way that's all onus on the parent. Do more, be sensitive, be empathic. And actually, it's really important to manage our overwhelm as well, because it's so easy to feel overwhelmed when parenting anybody, and especially a child with neurodiversity. So sometimes it feels like, oh, we need to work on everything, get them to catch up in all areas, solve all of the challenges now. And there can be times when it feels like they're struggling in so many areas that we just don't know where to start and exhaust ourselves firefighting on all fronts. So I find this idea from NVR really useful, that helps us prioritise and focus, and helping us be more regulated and effective in where we focus our energy. Can also help reduce guilt and overwhelm. You don't have to do it all now. Not only do you not have to, it's impossible. So the steps here is you write down on slips of paper all the child's issues and behaviours that are most troubling for them, annoying for you, disruptive at school, dangerous, worrying, everything you wish you could change with a magic wand. And then you sort them with your parenting team, if helpful, partner, family, friends, network, into 3 baskets. Now, the red basket is the smallest. You can only put 1 or 2 things in there, and they're always the most serious ones, especially if there's violence or danger. These are the ones to direct your energy and attention to work hard, your firm boundaries, always with empathy, so you can always say, that is not okay, and I get that you're feeling scared. I get that you're jealous, and it's not okay to slap your brother at his birthday party. So the more we can accept and help with feelings, the more effective our boundaries are going to be. But we don't want to be spending all our days saying, no, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. So just 1 or 2 in there, either about prevention or those firm boundaries. And these are your non-negotiables. And then we've got the amber basket. So these are a few important issues you might be working on, but they're not the top priority. You can pay attention to them when everyone's in a good space, in their window of tolerance, but let them go when times are hard and energy is low, and can negotiate around them. So these are not the non-negotiables. These are the things you can flex about. Oh, today, just an extra hour screen time. Well, that gets us all through to bedtime. That's okay. And generally, when times are tough, we need to up support and compassion for all. So yes, for our children, but for ourselves, and lower expectations for all. So, okay, I just can't do that today. Today, we're going to let that go. And then the lovely green basket, which is the biggest, everything else on those bits of paper. And they're now classified as MBIs, minor but irritating. These are the things you're going to aim to ignore or let go of or accept or live with for now. So you put your energy into a couple of important things. When you're having a good day, when they're having a good day, you can tackle some of the others. And there's a lot that you're going to let go. And as the red things sort themselves out, the green things in the green basket will get a turn, but you're only ever tackling maximum 2 at a time. And this is important too, a rainbow basket. So at the same time as you're tackling 1 or 2 issues with consistency, parental presence, love, authority, empathy, put things in the rainbow basket that give you hope, joy, keep your spirits up. These might be things that you like or liked if you're having a bad time about your child that can become lost or hidden in challenging behaviours. There might be parenting moments you're proud of or compliments you receive. I always think it's so important to give yourself the praise you deserve for your parenting. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have a good day or you're effectively tackling that behaviour. But if you've put effort in, you've put time in, and you're trying your best, then you deserve to feel good about your parenting. Or in the rainbow basket, it might document the baby steps your child is taking in their development. So those massive things like a kid who never apologizes actually coming to say, I'm sorry, or kids who don't hug, giving you a hug. These are really, really important. So overall, acceptance that they're doing the best they can, individualized, what are the strengths and challenges of this unique individual. It's often helpful to adjust our expectations rather than pushing against the tide. Pace and understanding is key. The condition, how it presents in your child, and your responses, your strengths and your limitations. And getting support and understanding for you as a parent is also incredibly important because it's a tough job. Okie dokie. So, hey Joe.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Helen. That was fabulous. Love the rainbow basket.
Yes.